Welcome back to Learn Your Stripes. I'm Ryan Guillory.
And I'm Michael Moran. And today we're going to discuss something a bit more unusual. We're going to talk about player equipment. Before we get into that, we're going to talk about the play we last left you with, which was several weeks ago now. Although if you're listening to this in just the traditional podcast form, we were just binging it, then it may be 5 minutes ago. We don't know, but we'll get to it anyway. All right, Team A or K lines up in free kick formation. Kicker K49 kicks the ball into the air. It travels 20 yards. R44 is in position to catch the kick, and K87 catches the ball before it ever hits the ground. And so we want to know from you, is there a foul? What would that foul be? Who's going to put the ball in play next? What's our down and distance, our game clock, our play clock, and if we had any sort of differences between high school and college. Now, obviously, we do have the difference of A and K designations, but that's just from the rulebook itself. So what's the answer? In this case, we're looking at KCI at both levels. And we have a free kick that hasn't touched the ground. B has to be given an unimpeded opportunity to catch the kick. And when K catches it, it is KCI. We're going to go 15 yards from the spot of the foul at both high school and college. One thing to note in the college world, if this occurs behind the B25 and had B given a valid fair catch signal, we're going to enforce that penalty from the B25. And at high school level, you may have to consider an awarded fair catch and the potential for try.
I'm going to take a moment for an after further review. As Michael somewhat alluded to, after our previous episode, I said that our recording was going to be a bit sporadic in December. And it was sporadic is probably too strong of a term. Sporadic, non-existent. Either way you want to look at it is how it ended up being. But it was a good chance for Michael and I to get a chance to rest and recharge after the season. So we're excited to be back here today. And then looking at what's coming up, we figured it's a good time to get into the rules. The off season's a great time to get into the rule book over and over again, dig into the rules, high school, college, both if you do both, just so that we're ready to go come spring scrimmages, summer scrimmages, all of that. And what better rule to start with than rule number one? We can find player equipment rules in rule number one in both the high school rule book and the college rule book. In the high school rule book, we're going to be looking specifically at rule 1, section 5. Michael and I are going to sort of go through these, not going to go point by point through both books, but give an overview of these in a good digestible format through the podcast. So Rule 1, Section 5 in the high school, the NFHS rulebook, gives us player designations, and it recommends offensive player numbers. Now, we're pretty much familiar with these. Backs and ends should be 1 through 49, 80 to 99, offensive linemen 50 to 79. The Rule 1, Section 5 also gives us mandatory player equipment. As we all know, players have to wear a helmet and a face mask. Nothing new there, but we want helmets that are properly fitted, professionally manufactured, and not altered. So our helmet and face mask, those have to meet the NOCSAE standard at the time they're manufactured. We want the face mask to have a surface covered with resilient material that's designed to prevent chipping, burrs, or abrasiveness, and to be properly secured to the helmet as designed by the manufacturer. And I always smile a little bit reading that specific rule because I remember I had some face masks back in the day that had some chips and rubber and other stuff that was probably a little bit more jagged than we would ever consider allowing today.
Some of them are rusted out a little bit too.
Right. But
might have been by design.
But helmets have come a long way, and that's a good thing for the sport. Of course, we want the helmet to be secured by a chin strap. I know sometimes we watch the NFL, some of the older school quarterbacks have those one buckle chin straps. The high school rules say we need 4 attachment points. Sometimes you'll see 4, sometimes as many as 6. But again, we just need a chin strap there. We want all helmets, whether they're new or reconditioned, to have that NOCSAE standard. And this goes into the coach's pregame verification that he gives to the referee and another game official, usually the umpire, that all his players are legally equipped and are in compliance with the rules, and that includes these exterior warning labels. So those are generally helmets as well as numbering. Michael, why don't you talk about jerseys?
Yeah, and jerseys are kind of the new fad this year, right? And that and pants, and I'm sure we'll get to that later. But yeah, one of the things with jerseys we're seeing more and more nowadays, just like with helmets, they've got to be unaltered, and we're seeing them be fitted a lot tighter. Ryan, I'm sure when you and I played, they were glorified T-shirts.
Right.
But the thing that's important is it has to be able to cover the shoulder pads, and it's got to be able to get tucked into the pants as well. A lot of players, leave them untucked because that's what they're seeing on Sundays, and even Saturday. I know we have to see that a lot too, but that's a safety thing. If the jersey's not fitted properly, then the shoulder pads aren't going to do what they're supposed to do either as well. And there's a couple other things that are optional within those jerseys. They can have the school logo. They can have a name on them. Of course, they can have decorative stripe. And I think the high school rulebook talks about what the numbers can and can't look like, right? It has to be clear and contrasting.
Right.
Talks a lot about that. And I think even the college level, there's a rule change coming down. I can't remember the year, Ryan, but it's going to have to, you can't have like a white number in a white jersey. They have to be more clearly defined.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to have a solid contrasting color as opposed to, those ones that we dealt with for a few years that it was sort of a faint outline of a number, but then the inside is the same color as the jersey. And it's hard enough to pick up numbers during plays, much less when you're dealing with that you can hardly see.
And one thing we'll talk about, too, is contrasting jersey colors. And I've got an example I can use from a incident we talked about, not incident rather, but a scenario we talked about from a study group I had. But the high school book talks about the visiting team has to be responsible for having a different color. That's kind of on them, and the referee has authority to determine whether or not that color is different. And if they have to, they can always make the home team go change because the visitors traveled. But that's not something we've experienced, right? We haven't had an issue, thankfully, with home team in blue and away team shows up in purple.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's pretty standard by the rules to have the home team in their color and then the visiting team's wearing white. I can't think of any visiting team I've ever had that didn't wear white. I know as soon as I say that, there's bound to be some example out there I'm overlooking, but.
Oh, yeah. I think it's more common to see, the altered colors at the college level than as much the high school level, but you never know. Always be on the lookout for it. Just something to be prepared for.
Right. Yeah, but as we mentioned, the home team jerseys are typically going to be the color. Obviously, it was several years coming, but now we have the rule as to what level of gray is acceptable. And now we have that 70% grayscale. I'm going to very poorly explain it, but it's certainly in the rule book. So you should go look at it to see what level of darkness is acceptable for a gray or silver jersey. But players of the home team, they wear unaltered jerseys of their color. The body of the jersey, of course, it can't have white, but it could be white if we're talking about a number, the name of the school, a nickname, a logo, something along those lines that's there. You could have a decorative stripe somewhere along it as well, or within the collar or as a side seam that we could be dealing with there. Of course, jerseys, as we might understand, they can have an American flag. It can be up to 2 inches by 3. It can be worn or occupy space on each item of uniform apparel. So they could have them jerseys, on the pants, on the helmet, anywhere. And state associations can allow for commemorative or memorial patches as well on the jerseys. So that's what jerseys can look like. Michael sort of alluded to this, but we'll get a little bit more specific as to the numbers on those jerseys.
And the numbers just need to be clear and visible and legible. And they do have to be in the Arabic number. It's, I suppose a team could come out and use something they could use Roman numerals, I guess, if they wanted to, but that's why they call that out in the rules, that it's got to be your traditional numbers that, we all learned. Now they can have a border if they want. They've got to be 8 by 10 inches. For newer officials out there, we don't take measuring tapes or rulers out on the field. So if you were to walk out and see a jersey that, the number looks like it's 16 inches, I don't know that I'd make a big fuss about it. I think I might notify the coach and I might notify the athletic director and say, hey, those are out of spec. But that's a heck of a booger to pick. It would need to be massive numbers, I think, in order for us to get our attention on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be something that's going to stand out to all 5 of you. It's one of those things where when you walk out, you kind of go up to another guy and say, hey, does that look right? And then
right.
you'll all eventually settle on it. Otherwise, it's as Michael said, it's sort of the whole concept, don't trouble.
Exactly.
We're not going to ask a trainer for a measuring tape, as Michael said.
No. And we did talk about, I think it is the 2024 season. The entire body of the number needs to be a single solid color. that contrasts with the body of the jersey. So if you have a blue jersey, you need to have a white number. If you had a red jersey, you could have a black number, but you couldn't have say a green jersey and a chartreuse number. It's a weird color, but I'm going with it. Like we talked about with jerseys, they have a purpose, and that's for the pads that go inside them. So the pads have to be protected and covered. And some of the pads that we're talking about, we're looking at hip pads and knee pads, shoulder pads, thigh pads, and then of course a mouth guard. I think the trend today with all the knee pads, that's the biggest one. Guys, for some reason, want to expose their knees and their patellas and their ACLs, and we'd like them to play the game as long as possible. So one of the things that we do on Friday nights and even into Saturdays is we're trying to prevent that. We're trying to go out and take a look around, get some numbers, hey, 63 or, usually the linemen aren't a problem. They like their knees.
Right.
They usually have the braces on. But
pads are good for linemen.
Yeah, linemen like pads. Usually it might be some of the players that might be a little more skilled that are faster and they think they can run faster without knee pads, and that might be true, but again, we like them to be protected. So the best thing you can do is take a note of the number, go notify the coach and say, Coach, hey, 17's got to get his knees covered, or 99, needs to get his knees covered. Obviously, if a hip pad is missing or a tail pad or something like that is missing, we need to be sure we notify that right away, because that player needs to get that corrected immediately. But that's some things that we can prevent before the game gets going, because it's much better to deal with that in pregame than it is during the game. And Ryan, I don't know if you've got any tricks. I know we work, different sidelines, but what do you have with your coach when talking about pants or anything like that?
I hesitate unless it's egregious to throw a player out if the pants are an inch above the knee. I'll typically tell the player, and then I'll go to the coach just to say, hey, I've told number 82, get those fixed the next time he comes in. I think you hit on a good point. It's incredibly difficult, and I know that our state director here in Indiana at the high school level, and in our conference as well for college, the knee pads and the knee pads being over the knees, it's an emphasis, and I get it. It's just it is so incredibly hard to enforce that, because watch any bowl game right now,
Sure.
Watch any game on Sunday, and just watch any skill player whose knees are actually covered by pads. It's going to be a very small percentage out there that are hitting that. So, to some extent, it's a losing fight at the high school level. It's one worth fighting, but we could really be helped out if the top of the pyramids were more strict about that, and that sort of trickled down to us.
Quick story. I got to share this one. I won't share the school or the coach, but coach came up and said, I said, hey, Coach, I don't remember the number. 19's got to get his knees covered. He goes, oh, he's 6'4", and the mediums, they're just not getting there. And we try to put him in an extra large, and he's swimming in them. And this would be what not to do, folks out there. I said, well, Coach, they make a large. I bet that would fit. It was a long Friday night. It was a long. I was very proud of that moment that I had that ready. But that did not build up the rapport with the coach, and he then informed me the rest of the night everything that I missed during that game. So there's better ways to handle that. That's what I want our audience to hear. Is there's better ways to handle that, and work with the coach and work with the players. Don't be a smartass.
Yeah, I mean that's always good advice, and we all hate playing uniform police. We have 100 other things that are out there that's more important. No one in the stands is coming for us to toss a player because, his shirt doesn't quite reach the waist. But these are rules, and people make an emphasis of it. And I find we might have a little more success being a little stricter in, scrimmages in the summer. If you try to hit it early, so it's something during the season. But if you start trying to enforce this at week 6, you don't have a chance. It's just, you're going to get that universal response. Well, they let me do it last week. Nobody's told me that all year. It's just, that's not the way to go. I can't control what anybody else does, but if I'm in the summer, if I'm in week 1, week 0 scrimmage, anything like that, saying, get the knees covered, get the jersey tucked in. That's all I can control. So
Yeah, and don't think about it from how you fixed last week. Think about how you can help going forward next week, right? If you're going to try to correct something like that, you're doing it for the guys or gals that are coming, the next Friday night for you, or the next Saturday coming for you.
Right. And Michael hit on a good point with the knee pads. Another one there that I see emphasis with both in high school and college is the tailbone pad. The whole push, compared to when we played just these massive hip and tailbone pads, I know there's more of the girdle and the thinner pads that are probably a lot more protective than what we had anyway, despite the size difference. There are a lot of players trying to get away without the tailbone pad. So that's one that's emphasized in both the high school and the college rule book. It's, if you see something's clearly out of whack, get to the coach, get to the player, talk to them and get it fixed as we're going there. But again, having been a lineman, I liked pads, and the whole knee pads that barely come over the thigh, it makes no sense to me if you're getting a helmet or a shoulder on your knee. But but I feel like I'm getting into the kids these days area by making this argument. So just try to get it enforced.
So we were talking about pads, and let's talk about some of the accessories that are worn, because I think that there's a lot of that going on nowadays as well. Just different bands, different braces, different visors, all that good stuff. And we'll get to visors in a bit. That's always a crowd pleaser. But forearm pads are pretty common, and those are fine. Obviously, you have kids that they might have wrists. Props to them for playing. And this is something I know on Friday night our umpire takes care of, and he's checking. They can have forearm pads. It talks about the type of material it's going to be. It's got to be kind of a closed cell foam. It's got to it can't be overly hard, and they can't have 18 rolls of tape on there or anything like that. Right. I think the most common thing you'll see almost all players nowadays have gloves on, and that's
right.
That's fine too. Obviously, they need to have the Noxie seal on them. I know Ryan and I are checking everybody's gloves to see Noxie on there. I can tell you, if you're a young official and you're checking all the labels on helmets and gloves, you're not going to work many more games. So, again, this is in the rule book. This is important, but you're looking for things that are standing out to you. We didn't talk about cleats, Ryan, but I know cleats are pretty standard, Reeboks, Nikes, Adidas. I think if you see a player come out and his cleats are 3 inches long, that might raise some concern. I think the rule says it's something like, I don't know, an inch or a half inch? It's something, it's quarter inch, I think, but we're not measuring cleats. We're not measuring those things. So
yeah, we're not measuring. And with cleats, of course, remember, it's got to be rubber. If the cleats are shining at you, there's something wrong.
Correct. Correct.
So that's one to step out at. We've talked a lot about padding, jerseys, that type of thing. An important one, of course, is always the mouth protector. What we're looking for. The thing that we're going to notice the most is when it's the mouthpiece that's strapped to the face mask and it's hanging at the snap, right? That's how we can yell, get it in, put the mouthpiece in. Whereas if it's one without a strap, it's a lot harder for us to enforce that unless it's just, stuck in the face mask or stuck in the ear hole or something like that, and we can see it. To some extent, as with all of this, to some extent, we just have to rely on the coach's verification in pregame, where he says his players are all legally and properly equipped. Because all of these measures, they're protective measures. They're designed to protect the players. So there's a responsibility there for both the player and the coach, the equipment managers, to make sure that they're properly equipped, because it's just we can't check all 22 players in between every snap to make sure everything's there. So it's a little bit much there. We talked about jerseys, we've talked about padding, pants. Of course, we hit on this with the knee pads. We want to make sure that the pants cover the knees completely. And I understand this is the rule. This is what the book says. The reality, watching a game, it's going to be quite a bit different. But we all have to be better at enforcing this and pushing it. there's only so much we can do. We're probably not going to throw out every player and cause a team to forfeit because the pants are too short, but just keep reminding them, keep pushing it. Again, it's for the protection of the players. It's not because we're trying to have fun yelling at them the whole time, right?
Correct.
Michael, we talked about shoes a little bit already in the cleats. Obviously we want football shoes. Soccer works to baseball, again, as long as they're rubber cleats. Try to look at what they are. Obviously the old 1950s and 60s Chuck Taylor basketball shoes, that's not going to cut it out on the football field. I don't know if it would cut on the basketball court anymore either, but it's certainly not going to work on the football field. Ski boots or something like that. Something with steel toes, again, not going to work out there. Obviously, tennis shoes or turf shoes without cleats are certainly acceptable too, especially with more fields that are turf, right?
Sure.
When it comes to the actual specifics of the cleats, the rule books give us the measurements. The free end, it can be rounded at an arc. The radius can't be less than 7/16 of an inch, as long as the overall length is not more than half an inch from the tip of the cleat to the sole of the shoe. So when we're looking at the length of the cleat there, that's what we're looking at there. There's some more specifics with platforms and some other things there. So again, Rule 1, Section 5 there. I don't want to get too bogged down in the various fractions of an inch, depending on the specific setup you have. But you don't have to have cleats. If you have them, they can't be longer than half an inch.
That's a great point, Ryan. We're out there to make sure everybody can participate and everybody can play, and we're not out there trying to police uniforms like you alluded to earlier and measure everything, because the game would never get played.
Right. So that's legal equipment. Michael, can you talk about some illegal equipment? We talked about things like metal cleats and different problems with jersey numbers or fonts, but what's some other illegal equipment for us to be looking at?
Well, Jack Tatum couldn't play today, right? We can't have all the stick 'em on our hands anymore. So how's that for a reference?
I don't know. Some of the gloves are basically the equivalent of that now, it seems.
Yeah, that's true. Tearaway jerseys can't have any of that action going on. And then the popular thing is to, I think it's classified as uniform adornments. But you'll see the wristbands that a lot of guys are wearing nowadays, and they'll go 3 or 4 on one arm. In high school,
right.
we're not doing that. So it's just a sweatband that you can have on your wrist. I know a lot of players have the play cards. You might see that. That's very common. Some guys will hang it on their belts, and that's not allowed by rule either. But they can put it on their wrist. And the rule book talks about 3 inches. I believe most of them nowadays are made pretty much standard to that, so it shouldn't be much of an issue. So.
Yeah, that's another one that trickles down from college and the NFL, because in college, of course, they can put the play card, that wristband on their belt, but in high school, that's not allowed. So, part of the thing about being a high school official is that you're stuck with kids who are trying to emulate. Not that we weren't back in the day when we were doing all this stuff ourselves, but it's trying to imitate the guys up at the college and NFL level, and that's certainly understandable.
I would say if you didn't catch a play card on a belt in pregame and it's the middle of the fourth quarter and you notice the quarterback's got it on his belt, let it go.
Yeah, it's the same philosophy of if you didn't call a specific type of hold in the first quarter, you're not calling that, as long as you saw both, right? If you missed it, that's a different story. But if you see the same play in the first quarter and pass on it and then see it with a minute left in the fourth in a close game, that's not the time to start calling that. But
Absolutely.
If you see a foul, it's a foul. If you don't, and you didn't call that same thing earlier, don't start at the end of the game either. But a little bit outside of equipment there. The rule book also gives us specifics there on towels. And again, I know we're getting a little bogged down in details here. What the rule book tells us is that a towel, if a player is going to have one, it can't be less than 4 inches in width and 12 inches in length, or no greater than 18 inches in width and 36 inches in length there. Of course, it can't be brown or yellow. It can't be the same color as the ball or as a penalty flag. And if one player wears a towel, then all players have to wear the same solid color towel there. I actually had a one that I recall now with a player having a towel that looked like a checkered flag, and then the other players on the team had a white towel. So I just mentioned it to him and got it fixed up. I didn't toss him out for a play or anything, and that was a very, very easy fix.
And I'll be honest, my first year, I don't know that I read Rule 1, and I can remember following a crew to a game late in the season, and they talked about towels, and I was like, I didn't know that was in the rule book. So, I think in regards to towels, I don't want newer officials out there thinking, oh gosh, these kids are just going to grab their mom's dish towel. That's not the case. Again, a lot of these rules that we have, uniform providers and accessory providers, for lack of a better term, they're generally making these things to code. Right. I say generally, but your Reeboks, your Nikes, there's a reason they're these broad manufacturers. It's because they have made everything to code. So you're not going to have to go out there and check and measure all these things. We just want you guys to be aware of things that you could have and kind of some lessons we've learned on how to handle pregame and preventive officiating.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Most of what you're going to see, most of what these athletic departments are getting, it's going to be legal equipment. And again, we're putting some stock into that coach verifying that his players are properly and legally equipped prior to the game. So you're not going to have to really go out there and measure and inspect too closely. However, knowing this rule is really helpful when something sticks out to you as being odd and you've read the rule, it's probably because it violates the rule.
There you go.
That's not a hard and fast rule for every rule in the rule book, but generally the things that stand out to you as odd stand out to you as being odd for a reason, whether it's equipment or a specific action on a play. So that's a sort of trust your gut there. And if it's an equipment thing you see pregame and you're just not quite sure, go to somebody else in your crew and just say, hey, that doesn't look right to me. What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Is that legal, illegal? And then typically, once you put 5 heads together, we'll come up with something that's hopefully right.
What about stuff on the face, Ryan? Like, a lot of players have eye black or the eye shields. What's going on there?
Yeah. We want to make sure eye black is fine. We don't want it to have words, numbers, logos, or other symbols. Eye shields, and typically we'll think of those as just visors. Those are legal as long as they're of a molded, rigid material and they're clear without any tint. I think we had 3 games last year, I want to say, where a player in pregame had a tinted visor. I went to tell him, hey, you can't wear that during the game. And I was told that was their pregame visor, which is wild to me. Wild. But you can do it in pregame. Sure. It's fine. We're not going to toss you out for something in pregame, but we're going to make sure we let you know you're not doing that once the game starts. So that's visors, that's eye black. Jewelry. Obviously we don't want jewelry out there. Again, that's something you'll see, especially at the NFL level. It is what it is. The rule book excludes religious and medical alert medals. Those aren't considered jewelry. A religious medal has to be covered in tape and worn under the uniform. And then a medical alert medal has to be taped, but it can be visible. And obviously, we don't want any other metal out there on the players. And just a few other items. Michael talked earlier about pads and that testing that the umpire will do for how constricted it is and whether it yields back, what the recovery is of that foam padding. Knee and ankle braces are fine as long as they're not altered. They don't require additional padding. With linemen especially, you mentioned you often see knee braces. Those are fine, but they can't be worn over the pants. Sometimes they'll stick out from under the bottom of the pants, but they can't be worn over the pants. there. One issue we face a lot is those back protectors, those back flaps that everybody wants to pull their jersey over. Those have to be fully covered by the jersey. And any other pads have to meet the NOCSAE standard there. So we've sort of alluded to this a little bit, Michael. At pregame, the head coach is going to verify to the referee and to at least one other official, often the umpire, that all of his players are legally equipped and in compliance with the rules, and they're not using any illegal equipment. And if there's any questions as to the legality of all the stuff we just talked about, as you said, the umpire goes around and tests for those as well.
Yeah.
If we have a piece of required equipment that's missing or some equipment worn improperly, the rule book gives us the right to declare an official's timeout, send that player out to get it fixed. If it's something that can be fixed between downs, then let's get it fixed between downs and play on. As long as we're not delaying the ready for play more than 25 seconds. But as we said, during a play, each player has to properly wear all the mandatory equipment there. So that's Rule 1, Section 5 in high school. At the college level, it's Rule 1, Section 4, and that's going to get us in there. So, Michael, I started off with player numbering at the high school level. You want to go over the player numbering at the college level for us?
It's pretty similar to the high school level when it comes to backs and linemen. They have some recommendations, backs being 0 to 49, usually putting their ends 80 to 99. Snappers are usually in the 50s, guards in the 60s, and tackles in the 70s, which is why a lot of times you kind of see that on TV, right, when you're watching that you typically see the 50, 260s, and 270s, but it's obviously not required. Just a recommendation. But everybody has to be 0 through 99, and 0 was added this year, I believe, in the college rule book.
I think 2 years ago.
Was it 2?
I think it was prior to
2021 was a long year.
Yeah, well, because we played 2 seasons this last calendar year, so
you're right.
It's hard. I think you're probably right that the year, yes, 2021, as to which season it was. 2020
season. You're right. Yeah,
they run together.
There you go.
But sorry.
No, you're fine. That's why we do this show, right? So we can do 0, and I still have a hard time getting you to see just 0 on there. Obviously, there's no double 0. We're not to basketball yet. And can't do anything like a 0-9 or a 0-1 or anything like that. But anything like that you're not properly numbered, it's a live ball foul, and we're going to go 5 yards in the previous spot. It's just something to be aware of there. So if a player ever changes their jersey, they have to report that to the referee, and then the referee will let the other coach know as well. So if you've changed your jersey and you didn't let somebody know, then you get smacked with a 15-yarder. So that's always fun.
Right.
But we're not going to go down that road.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that myself, but it's one to know for certain. One of the other ones there, obviously, we can't have multiple players of the same team with the same number during a down. I have had that one. That's a live ball foul, 5 yards from the previous spot.
Yep.
So, and it's also a 5-yard foul from the previous spot. If, as Michael said, if somebody comes in with a basketball number 00 or 07, 09, whatever it is, again, chances are you're not going to see that, but the rules are there, and because at some point it was probably violated. So.
And just like in high school, same thing with mandatory equipment. We've got to have helmets. Again, I think you're seeing more commonly, 4-point chin straps. I haven't seen a 6-point yet. So if somebody sees one, send us an email, learnyourstripes@gmail.com, because we'd like to know.
I think I've seen them. I don't know the manufacturer, but it's one of the funky sort of really, I don't even know how to describe it, but the very tall modern face mask that have sort of attachments at the top and down near the ear portion. I think I've noticed the 6-point straps on those.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Same deal with the NOCSAE logo. That's going to be on there too. And I can't say I looked for it on every helmet, but again, it's all made to standard. Hit pads, tailbones. We talked about this. Jerseys we'll cover here in just a second, because some of those teams in college like to get a little more creative with their jerseys, and we'll talk about that. Knee pads, pants, shoulder pads, and thigh pads, of course. I'm going to leave the mouthpiece for last because I don't know if you've seen it, Ryan. Lately, the cool thing to do, it seems like on Saturdays, is to attach your mouthpiece to your face mask and then just let it hang there. And I think we talked about it earlier. And you all, I encourage you all to watch some Saturday football because you'll oftentimes see it'll be a black jersey, a black face mask, and then a white mouthpiece, and it's just flopping around. That's something where we need to intervene and get in there and shut that down. I think. Right. If it's a play, and as he's coming to the line, a lot of times an umpire can help out and say, "Hey, mouthpieces, let's go get them in." If you got a receiver and your line of scrimmage official, you can obviously direct that to them. Right. But if they're a habitual offender, penalize them by taking them off the field. I think if it's the second, third time and they're not cooperating, then they're welcome to sit a play out until they can figure out how they can put the mouthpiece in. So,
yeah, I mean, it should be a really easy fix with a warning, but if you've given warnings and they're getting ignored, send them out. They'll learn, as Michael said there. Michael, one thing I wanted to cover with mouthpieces, and this stands out to me every time I read the rule, and it may just be I'm not thinking about this correctly. So, the rule specifies that the mouthpiece can't be white or transparent. And when I'm watching football, every receiver and running back I'm looking at has a white mouthpiece, but it's one that straps to the face mask so we can see it. Do you think that the not white or transparent is meant for the ones that don't have straps so that we can tell them apart from the teeth? Or is what we're seeing in all these games with these white mouthpieces that are hanging from the face mask, are all of those illegal, or is it just the ones without the strap so we can make sure there's something in there?
I want to say I might be making this up, but I thought I remember seeing some sort of bulletin, or maybe it might be buried somewhere in the rule book, that if you've attached it, it's okay because we can clearly see some sort of attachment piece. But I believe you're correct in the initial reason for white or transparent was that way you could easily distinguish, hey, these got a blue mouthpiece or a green or a black or a red. But with white, it's a little tough to see with the teeth there.
Yeah, I think
it's attached. It changes, and that's different. So.
Yeah, now that you mention, I think I recall that, and that makes sense. The whole idea is just for us to be able to tell that there's a mouthpiece, right? So if we see that, those white ones with the thick straps hanging from the helmet, we can notice that. Even me on the line of scrimmage from 30 yards away, I can see the running back, with that mouthpiece. So that makes sense there.
Well, now they've got holes in the middle. It's like, you can breathe now with them, and I wish I had that. There are all these cool things when we're not playing anymore. It's unfortunate.
The difference in mouthpieces from when I played to today, it's remarkable. You're a few years younger than me, so it was already evolving by the time you were coming up. But yeah, there's something now. And again, this is going to be our one podcast where we sound the oldest that we will ever sound on here. Back in our day.
Yeah.
All right. As Michael said, we're going to talk some more specifics about jerseys. So the jerseys, the sleeves, of course, have to cover the shoulder pads. As with everything else here, all pads have to be covered. Shoulder pads, back flaps, rib protectors, knee pads, anything else has to be covered. As with high school, jerseys can't be tearaway. They have to be tucked into the pants or made to be even with the waistline. Another one here, and again, what you're watching on TV is going to be very different, but an undergarment such as a t-shirt cannot extend below the waistline at the torso. Sometimes they get away with that. One of the emphases this year was that you can't have a t-shirt of a different color from the jersey hanging out below the jersey. That was one of the points of emphasis.
That's true, yeah.
That we were dealing with. The rule here flatly says that there's no undergarment that shall extend below the waistline at the torso. So as I read that, as it's written here, that would include a t-shirt of the same color. But, that's, what we're looking at there. Now, one of the rules that came in, again, I think this was 2 years ago or 2 seasons ago, I'm so lost because, again, we played 2 seasons in one calendar year, and it is
Right.
wild to think through. I think it was 2 seasons ago, is that a player can wear a second jersey that meets all the requirements. So that gets back to that concept of a player changing numbers. Um, so I saw this in a game recently where there was a lineman who would come in as a tight end at number 33. So in theory, he could, let's say he's number 70, right? So he has this number 70 on top. And then when they want to send him in as a tight end, they take that jersey off, and he's already got the tight end jersey on and can go in there just fine. So that's how that would work. And not surprisingly, can't have vest or anything with a zipper, Velcro, or anything else on the field. But there are certain things that a jersey can have. Of course, numbers, player's name, school name, mascot name, NCAA logo. You could have other logos such as a school, conference, mascot, a bowl game, or other postseason game, a memorial patch, or something honoring the military. You could have graduate or academic recognition there, a conference logo, a C for a team captain, and either an American and or state flag there. There's certain size restrictions in terms of how much the jersey can be covered. Obviously, it can't be a billboard or anything of those sorts. And borders there as well. But jerseys can't be taped or tied up. So I don't think that's really an issue today. That was more of I want to say a late 80s, 90s type of thing where they would get knotted up at when we had those looser jerseys, as Michael was mentioning, the jerseys have become, much more snug over time. But when they were looser, players would sometimes knot them up at the bottom to make them a bit tighter and less easy to grab as they were. So that's jersey design. Michael, let's talk about the color now.
So again, jerseys have to be opposite or a contrasting color, and players on the same team obviously wear the same jersey and color design. So you couldn't have, half your team come out in blue and half your team come out in red because you're doing something fun. No, everybody's got to wear the same color. The visiting team has to wear white jerseys. And the home team can wear white jerseys if they have agreed to that in writing before the season. If the home team wears a jersey, the visiting team can also wear a color jersey, but they have to have a couple of conditions. They have to have agreed prior to the game, and the conference of the home team has to certify that color is contrasting. Now, we did have a situation recently where we had a school that came in a non-white jersey, and this is one that we actually intervened in, and we did everything we could. We notified both coaches. We called our conference commissioner, and we were looking for perhaps somebody left a Post-it note on somebody's desk. We did everything we could because it does carry a pretty hefty penalty. They're charged a timeout at the beginning of each quarter, and they're given a 15-yard penalty after the kickoff in each half. So kind of a fun scenario, something we didn't think about right away. But I won't mention the teams, but all I will say is the visiting team was not in white, and we, like I said, tried to handle as best we could and talk to both coaches, and everybody was understanding about it. And I don't think we'll probably ever see it again, hopefully. But it's one of those that you don't really like to have to administer that penalty. It kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Well, it's pretty hefty since you have both the yardage and the timeout at the start of every quarter, or delay a game if there's no timeouts left. I mean, that's a pretty strict penalty.
Yeah, and I had the coach, and I said, "Hey, do me a favor, don't call any timeouts at all, because I don't want you to have to get another delay game penalty." So, same thing with the numbers, just like we talked about. Can't use Roman numerals; they've got to be the traditional Arabic numbers that we talked about. Same height, 8 by 10, all that good stuff. Any teams that have a jersey that don't conform to the rule, we're going to try to get them to change into a legal jersey before the game starts. So I guess if they have warm-up visors and they have warm-up jerseys, by golly, knock yourself out. But please, please, please change your jersey before the actual kickoff happens. Otherwise, we're going to have to administer an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. Ryan, we've talked a lot about jerseys. It's a little heftier fine in the NCAA realm. I think this will be an interesting one here with the additional equipment that we're seeing today in the college realm. What do we got there?
Yeah, we talked about towels at the high school level. The college, the size of towels, it's much more restrictive. They can be solid white and no smaller than 4 by 12 and no larger than 6 inches by 12 inches. So a plain white towel that's a of a fairly standard size there. You can have hand warmers out during inclement weather. So anytime it's getting cold, you can see players out there with that as well. Gloves are very similar to high school. It's a fitted covering, something for each finger and the thumb. Nothing connecting those, so no webbing or anything that might help with catching or anything of that sort. They can be any color. They have to have the NF or NCAA specifications, the SFIA specifications, or the NOCSA. Eye shields, as with high school, must be clear, not tinted, and from a molded or rigid material. If they're wearing glasses or goggles, they have to be clear and not tinted. And there's no medical exceptions allowed here. Eye shade, according to the rule book, must be solid black with no words, numbers, logos, or other symbols. I've recently watched some games where there was eye shade that definitely had words, numbers, logos, and other symbols on it. But we're giving you what's in the rule book there, and that I think that's becoming the rules getting enforced more. There was a time where everybody had writing on the eye shade that was going out there, so I think it's getting a little closer there. And here, those the wristbands with the play cards that we talked about, the rule book specifically says it can be on the wrist, the arm, or the belt. So as we said, high school they can't wear it on the belt. College it can be on the belt. What's some other illegal equipment out there, Michael?
Obviously anything that's dangerous. So if somebody comes out with a samurai sword, you're gonna have them take that back to the locker room. Any sort of hard or like a hard cast, and again, There's a lot of things called out in the rule book that you'll read and say, why is that in there? Probably because somebody tried it one time. That, and they don't do it again. But a hard cast is something that obviously we can't have. It's got to be kind of a softer cast. Cleats that are longer than a half inch. And again, going back to that with a measurement, it's something you would notice. You would notice something is just out of line. So any sort of equipment that could confuse or deceive an opponent, or any equipment that might provide some sort of unfair advantage. We talked about a glove that might be extra sticky or has some webbing maybe between the fingers. I haven't seen that, but if somebody brought a baseball glove, that's got to go. We referenced any sort of stickum or any sort of I guess if somebody wanted to grease themselves before the game to be slippery so they could be tackled, can't do that. And really, there's not a lot you can attach to uniform like we talked about, other than play cards or towels or hand warmers. Lastly, any rib pads or flak jackets. I don't know if they call it flak jackets anymore. That all has to be covered. That can't be exposed. And any sort of visible bandana, that's got to be tucked up and out of the way. And I think the thing that's kind of going away too, Ryan, I don't know, what made a brief stint was those big overbuilt face masks. I'm pointing to my face. I know it's great radio. But if folks can kind of think back to, I don't know, it's bigger, I think, in the NFL. Just everything was overbuilt. And by that, I mean there's a lot of bars running across your face, 5, 6, 7 bars running across just below the eyes. Those have kind of gone away too. We can't have those anymore either. So. Yeah,
that was a big thing. When I'm thinking NFL, like late 80s, early 90s, I recall some specific players with some just outlandish face masks, sometimes because of fractures in the face and such. So that's certainly understandable. But not allowed in the college game by rule. And I think most of these we can think through. Obviously, when we're talking about the jersey design and the pants design or the helmet design, the visible portion, that's just an aesthetic thing. But the rest of this, it's for player safety, right? So if you see something that looks dangerous, chances are there's a reason it's sticking out to you, as we said. So a lot of this is going to be common sense, but these are important rules to know both for high school or college. College is the same with high school, right? We rely on the coaches to tell us that their players are legally and properly equipped. At the college level, the coach gives a written certification to the umpire before the game that all their players have been told what equipment is mandatory by rule and what would constitute illegal equipment, have been provided the equipment that's mandated by rule, have been instructed to wear and how to wear mandatory equipment during the game, and have been instructed to notify the coaching staff when equipment might become illegal through play during the game. I find, I don't know about you, Michael, but I find that a lot of times when a player does have illegal equipment and we tell the coach doesn't get mad at us. They get mad at the player because, it'll be like, well, he had the right thing or he was provided that. Why doesn't he have it out here? So, the coaches will work with you on this stuff because, again, it's required, first of all, but it's for the safety of the players on the field. And safety is a massive issue. High school level, college level, NFL, Pee Wee. It's part of what we're out there for, right? I mean, we're enforcing rules for unfair advantages, but we're also enforcing rules for player safety. So that's the equipment. Just one last thing, just to talk about at both levels, high school and college. Players can't have electronic, mechanical, or other signal devices that allow them to communicate with anyone. A couple exceptions there would be a hearing aid or something that's specifically for health and safety. So if you have perhaps an insulin pump or something along those lines that might have some electronic
heart monitor or something like that. A
heart monitor, right? Something like that. Yeah. But if there's some illegal electronic, mechanical, or such signal devices, it's a dead ball foul 15 yards from the succeeding spot, and the player would be ejected. So pretty hefty penalty there for that. Probably why we don't really see that.
Somebody did it one time.
Somebody did it one time. They got thrown out of the game, and they learned the hard way. But then everybody else saw that and said, yep, we're not doing that. So that's a great overview of high school and college equipment requirements. Again, the high school rule, it's Rule 1, Section 5. The college rule is Rule 1, Section 4. I encourage you to read those. It might be tempting to skip over that to get into some of the other rules, but these are important things to know. It'll help you pick up on these when you see it out on the field. So we hope this has been useful for you. And we thank you for joining us once again for the first time in 2022 for a new episode of Learn Your Stripes. We're going to do something a little different, though, because this is the first episode of 2022. Instead of leaving you with the play today, we're going to give you something a little bit different. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael now for that.
We just crossed over to the new year, and so we mentioned we're in the off season of officiating, and so we thought we'd go ahead and do our officiating resolutions for the upcoming season here. I'll go ahead and go first. My goal this year is, like anything else, always to be in better shape, always to get in game shape. I think I spend a lot of time, waiting until spring to get into that shape, and you spend more time trying to get into shape if you just stayed in shape all year. So I think everybody listening out there, it's hard, especially where we are in Indiana. We hit 15 degrees today, so you don't have to go outside if you don't want to, but find a way to at least try to stay active and be moving. That way you can. That way, when you're moving in October or November, some of us are lucky enough to be working then. It's not as difficult. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing for me too is to spend more time thinking through play scenarios during the week, getting prepared for Fridays and Saturdays both. I do a good enough job of reading the rules, but not necessarily applying the rules. So I want to spend more time this year trying to apply rules and watching games. We still got some football left. We got some college left. We got one more game. And then we got the NFL still has their season too. So that's some time to watch some rules or watch some games and apply some rules. So your turn, Ryan.
Yeah, I think those are great things to work on. And I think you've hit on a good point there that it's important to set these goals and to set, we're calling these our officiating resolutions, but to make it manageable, right? Because we could both come up with a list of 50 things we want to improve on.
Right.
But it's hard to do that when you've got that. It's much easier to focus. I know one thing our high school crew does is we'll have games where prior to the game, and JP's really good about this. He'll ask us, what's the one thing you want to work on this week, right? And we'll go around and hit that. And it gives us something to think about. So when I was thinking through this, I came up with 3. For me, it's 3 C's. So the first one is confidence. right? I spend a lot of time in the rule book, you know, and so when there's stuff that I see, I want to be more confident both in my calling and then in reporting the foul and sticking with what I'm seeing there. But just in general, just portray confidence better on the field. It's going to help me communicate with coaches. It's going to help me communicate with players. And it's going to help me communicate with other officials. So the first one there is confidence. One of the related ones there, it's crispness, right? We have to understand what our limitations are and what our abilities are. And I'd never say this fishing for compliments, but, as an official, I'm stronger at the mental aspect than I am at the physical out on the field. I'm never going to be a gifted sprinter running up and down the sidelines, right? That's just, I can't change that. But what I can work on is that when I'm giving a signal, when I'm doing my mechanics, I can be crisp in doing that so that when I watch myself on film, I feel more, going back to confidence, I feel more confident in how I look out there because I'm being crisp in what I'm doing there. So confidence, crispness, and consistency. And what I'm thinking of in that, we all walk off the field and I know us and most of the people we know. The first, we don't think about the 99% of the plays that we got right and did well on. It's always the one or two that stick with you. And, as soon as we get back to the locker room, we're kicking ourselves over, God, that one play with 13 minutes left in the third quarter. If only I had done this or been in this position, right? But it varies from game to game. Some games will have that and it's very few, and then you might watch the film and feel a lot better afterwards. And sometimes I watch the film and I feel a lot worse afterwards. So I feel if I'm looking at my season, it's a very big sort of wave type of pattern, ebb and flow. I'll be up 1 week, down the next week, up 1 week, down the next week. And so my goal, both at the high school level and the college level, is to be more consistent. I know I'm not going to be perfect, and so I accept that. I'm going to shoot for that, but I'm going to accept that I'm not going to be. But I want to make sure I don't feel much different week to week. I want to limit those issues so I don't have a week where I just feel like I have no idea what I'm doing out here. Why is anybody letting me officiate? And then the next week go out and feel like I have the best game I've ever worked in my entire career, and then go out the next week and I'm back to that one feeling terrible. So the things I want to work on this year: confidence, crispness, and consistency. I think if I can do those and focus on those, it's going to be an awfully good year. So that's going to be my resolutions. And I liked yours as well, so I might add those into myself as well. So I had 3, you had 2. So I think a handful of things are certainly worth working on there.
You make a good point, though. We don't want to make our list too long because, like you said, we've got to set goals too. And this is everybody. We've got to set goals that will help us succeed, right? This job that we do is very physical, but Father Time is undefeated, and he catches up with all of us. So if you're like us and you played, maybe when you were younger, you try to set bench goals, or you try to set 40 goals, or whatever you try to set. You would always just try to challenge yourself just a bit more. But you got to remember too, high school and we're right in our career. It's not paying the bills, so we have other jobs that we've got to do that. We've got family time, we have other obligations. So set goals with your officiating career that you can attain, but will challenge you just enough to get better.
There's certain. Yeah, I think the last thing you said there, and I rudely cut you off, not overwhelming you. I think that's the important part, because if you set 20 goals, it's just impossible to achieve that much. Not that you're not talented enough, but it's just very difficult to do that much. And there's no point setting goals that are going to set you up to feel like a failure. We set goals so that we can achieve them. They build us up, and then we set new goals at that point in time. We're constantly trying to overcome obstacles, correct our deficiencies, and get better. And if you and I having 2 or 3 goals, if we accomplish those, we're going to feel awfully good, and then we're going to set some new goals. A year from now, we're going to be talking about what are our 2023 officiating resolutions. So don't overwhelm yourself. If you have one big goal that you want, set that one big goal. Focus on that, knock it out, and then once you get there, come up with something new. It's a constant evolution. It's not like Michael and I, if he hits his goals this year, if I hit mine, we're going to just be satisfied at that. No, like I said, a year from now, we're going to be saying, all right, it's 2023. Well, I guess knock on wood, we're both able to be here a year from now, setting resolutions for 2023.
There you go.
But the idea is that this is an unending process of trying to get better and trying to make ourselves better. And, like with Michael and I, we set these goals. We know what they are. We can push each other, right? I can ask him, how to go this week, staying in shape's one of your goals there, getting in the rule book. How'd that go for you? And, I have my goals. He can say, hey, what did you do? How are you feeling this week about your consistency compared to last week, right? So we can push each other and find somebody on your crew, somebody who can help you with that. It can be a spouse, it can be a crewmate, it can be a friend, it can be all of them. Push each other there. So our challenge to you that we leave you with is to set your officiating resolutions for 2022. And we would love for you to email those to us at learnyourstripes@gmail.com. As always, you can find us on your app of choice, or you can obtain episodes or an RSS link to directly download all of our episodes into your podcast app of choice at learnyourstripespodcast.com. Please also follow us on Facebook at Learn Your Stripes Podcast and on Twitter at LYS_podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends, but also please rate us 5 stars and leave a review on your app of choice. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. In the meantime, keep learning your stripes.
Thank you, everyone.